Hi, Jerry.
Hello there, Mitchell Gold. How are you today?
Wonderful, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, and I want to thank you for putting time aside for an interview with WGRNradio.com and, of course, my program, which is called 15 Minutes of Fact. And I think we're going to deal on a lot of those facts today, and I'd like to introduce you and our subject today. So give me a second for that, because I think you're the type of person that people need to know more about. Mitchell Gold is our interview subject today. I can guarantee it'll be both interesting and challenging for my readers of 15 Minutes of Fact. The interesting part, hopefully, is listening to a man who announces himself as the architect of Homeplanet Virtual University, not totally tongue-in-cheek, and who has invested considerable time in dealing with and helping to, I would say, steer and promote what is called ISO 26000, which proposes to, shall we say, set standards across all systems in the world and become a tool for global education and for peace. Am I correct on that, Mitch, so far?
That is well said. Yes, I can own all of those comments.
Oh, good. Well, as you know, Occupy Wall Street being the subject at hand, and there's no better test tube for change than that particular movement, I'd like to also talk about the challenging part, which is going to be for your show, and that's you're providing us 4 segments, 15 Minutes of Fact, based on the spokes of the medicine wheel and designed to be able to explain and apply ISO 26000, as well as different aspects of how that applies to Occupy Wall Street. So your challenge, of course, is to be able to take the tremendous amount of information that you have and condense it into 4 programs. For example, our first discussion is going to be on economics, ethics, energy, and health, and how you propose to show us that this is of importance to the Occupy movement, or perhaps show us the importance of the Occupy movement on those subjects. So I'd like to welcome you to the show today, Mitch, and before we go into it, I want you to know I'm giving you a little bit more than 15 minutes of fact, because I'd also like to have you tell people about your own background, who you are and how you came about to be interested in that subject, and of course your interest in Occupy Wall Street.
Okay, well, quickly I will just give you a 60-second on myself. My name is Mitchell Gold. I'm a chartered accountant brought up in Toronto, Canada. I went on a 1,000-day voyage from September 16th, 1997 to June 15th, 2000. And on that 1,000-day voyage, I learned a lot of important information that I'm going to bring forward on the show as facts. These are the facts as I saw them back then. And the facts that I'm going to be talking about here are very important to Wall Street and how the Wall Street movement, the Occupy movement. And remember, this is about the Wall Street mentality. We focus more on the word Occupy now, but our attention was to talk about the corporations being irresponsibility. They've lost their responsibleness. And that's Occupy Wall Street is about the economics of how they change and the ethics of how we change it and how we use the media and education within the context of changing their minds. How do we do that from an Occupy mind? You know, we come into the Occupy mind as if it were the first initiative. It's Occupy came in well after the cultural creative movement formed itself. We are the part of the cultural creative movement. The Occupy movement is a subset of the cultural creatives. And one of the great things about the cultural creatives is that they are totally unorganized.
Okay, now you're using terms which I have to stop and identify, not only for myself, but perhaps for listeners who aren't totally up on the subject matter as well. And I'm sure there are quite a few. What is how did you call them? Cultural creative?
Cultural creative is a human being that is concerned about what's happening in the world and is willing to do a little bit about it every day.
Got it. That pretty well describes a lot of people involved in Occupy.
Yes, more so. The people in Occupy, I talked to one fellow today. He drives 20 miles every day just to stand and hold the sign. Now
That's great.
see, we haven't done is account. How do we account for all this stuff? And this is why I wrote a book on this. It's called Why Accounting Isn't Boring. And we have to account for everything that is in the Occupy movement. How do we account for what's here? This is one of the things the cultural creatives, they don't teach it yet because they haven't even recognized it, although I shouldn't say they haven't recognized it fully, but interviewed in the film on the cultural creatives, one fellow researcher identifies the importance of double entry bookkeeping. Imagine that.
Now, this is perfect because we're talking about economics, ethics, energy, and of course health. I would imagine health goes into quite a few different areas. But if you go back to the idea of economics, and you're telling me you wrote a book called Economics, or what, Accounting Isn't Boring?
That's correct.
Isn't that a contradiction in terms, or am I missing the point here?
You haven't read the book, obviously.
That is correct.
Well, one of Canada's top accountants read the book and didn't get it. But
really?
he did. He did get it, but in getting it, he didn't get it. Now let me explain that, because this is actually a fact. The head of the Institute of or the accounting profession in Canada, one of the top guys, Lyman McInnes. When he was writing for CA magazine, he reviewed my book, and he put down the most important points are 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot. That was his summation of my book. And I wrote him back and I said, Lyman, you missed the whole point of the book. And I put 4 dot, 5 dot, 6 dot. And you see, the point of the book was that it was a blank book.
Which means to what? To our listener, what is a blank book called? Accounting is not boring. How does that? How can I relate to that as a listener to this?
You can look at it and you can laugh if you want to laugh at it, because like it's a joke book. It's styled after other joke books of the same genre. Like Women That Like Me, a blank book.
Now that's the part where I can say I got it and really think that I did get it.
Okay. Well, let's read the book. So I'm addressing economics of the Occupy movement. In the Occupy movement, there's so much economic energy being used there. Economic people, like, look at this guy. One guy, he drives 20 miles 2 ways every day to hold the sign. If we put a value on that energy, and because that is important energy to be spent. This man is a symbol of all the people in America that want to do something, and this is what he can do. He's 63 years old, and he lives somewhere in Pennsylvania, I believe, and he goes to an Occupy session nearby, 20 miles nearby.
Okay.
Okay, so the economics of that activity is huge. The huge impact on, and this is our job in media and communication, is to say that activity, if we measured that, and we measured that across America and around the world, of who stands together in the Occupy movement, and that when we shift our behaviors, when the little mouse of Occupy Cafe moves, we shift the elephants. We make the elephants move.
That elephant, of course, being Wall Street. So
That
how is it that a guy can drive 20 miles and because of people like him shift Wall Street?
well, that's part of the process, I'm only have 15 minutes, and I'm going to talk about all the different areas here. So to
Yeah,
talk about the
please do.
specifics of the process, I just want to give the ground rules. The ground rules are the the Occupy movement needs to more fully understand the intention behind the ISO 26000, the intention, and um, how they will do this is organizing themselves in any way they want. And we are facilitating the organization in a virtual way in a university format with addressing uh, 12 different sectoral behaviors.
And is that where you get the medicine wheel comparison?
Yeah, well, the medicine wheel is one of the ways I use to help organize my thinking. I organize my mind according to the energies of the wheel, and in every sector of the wheel is another aspect, like it's physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual in one of the aspects, and
Yes.
then there's economics, energy, ethics, and health in another aspect. And then within each of those aspects, there are quadrants within each of the aspects. And under economics, you have your banking, you have your information technology, and you have your human resources. And this is one of the key things we want people to bank. We want to integrate banking and human resources. We want people to bank their time with the Occupy movement or with the Home Planet movement or with the cultural creative movement. We want them to bank their time because
Now, now that really catches my attention. Since banking has demonstrated at its worst that it is greed motivated, at least the people who manipulate banking, and yet you're suggesting that there's a way of being able to bank this energy and create, is it a different form of bank? What are we talking about?
um, consider it just like any bank that you want to consider it. But right now we're just calling it Home Planet Bank. But it can be called anything bank. It can be called Cultural Creative Bank. It can become the Jerry Ashton Bank. We will take the name that is least offensive to the most people, and that's where we will bank our time because we are part of the Occupy movement, but we're also part of the Cultural Creative movement. We might want to call it the Cultural Creative Bank, although I wouldn't want to do that without the full agreement of the people that are already consider themselves in charge of that movement. It's how do we work together? And I don't know exactly how the cultural creative movement, which is been operating parallel to where I've been operating for the last 10 years, but how do we integrate the knowledge and wisdom that has sort of glommed onto the cultural creative discussion and the area that I've been working in parallel in developing the ISO 26000 standard and merging those two constructs. It's the merging of the constructs where the skills of the medicine wheel are very helpful. Because
Would,
we'll start.
would you say that ISO 26000 directly references banking, or is this just an umbrella document that includes banking?
Well, banking is not even addressed in the document.
Interesting.
They may talk about financial responsibilities and stuff like that in terms of, but most economic terms that are commonly used they're sort of like given beforehand. You assume that these transactions are talking about uh, um, money as energy. You know, they don't talk about the document doesn't identify a particular currency.
Okay.
And this is where we in the cultural creative movement, we have been using barter for 20 years. We know barter. We just have a different definition of money. our definition of money is energy.
Okay.
And it's human energy. It's backed by human energy, which will be backed by relationship. I started with in the North Quadrant. I started with economics banking. Our next step or the step with banking and human resources, we need to have our information technology network so that we can access all this stuff. So we need, and the technology is there. It's like we don't have to invent it. We can use the LinkedIn model, or we can use the Facebook model, and that gives us a tool to connect everybody without having to use any proprietary separate infrastructure. Although
okay.
we may prefer to have separate. That's a decision that has to be made. We can just take it off the board, free, or do our own. And the thing in our banking model, we teach that sometimes free is too expensive. That's why we need to have double entry bookkeeping. So when you have double entry, you recognize really quickly that free is too expensive. Many times.
Give me an example of how free is too expensive.
Right now, you're giving me your time freely.
That's correct.
Okay. And I'm giving you my time freely. It's a good exchange. We're both happy.
Got it.
If you don't deliver on your end, which is often the case when you don't pay people to do something. You don't pay someone to do something. If you don't make an exchange, if you don't make an entry, this is an asset. We are creating an asset in this interview with knowledge and information that are facts. These facts need to be shared. My agreement was to invest my time with you, and you have your commitment back to me is to take it to WGRN and put it up on their network.
Correct.
And WGRN, we're giving it to them freely. We should have an arrangement with WGRN where we get paid in trading units for our energy that we input, because WGRN is the outreach of to the community called radio.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
Internet radio. We are, through the Occupy movement, going to create for WGRN a global network of radio stations. A global network. That's what we are doing, Jerry, right here, you and I, through the Occupy movement. This is the message to the Occupy movement. We are doing this and bringing people together, but if we do it totally freely, everybody freely, and everyone is giving, the network doesn't ever exist.
So where do we have to create something called value given for value received? Certainly in my case, and let's use this as an example, our interview. My purpose of doing this is to get out the word to Occupy, or people who are interested in Occupy, to educate them as to what it really is rather than what the mainstream media tries to portray it. So that's my contribution to the world called Occupy. Your contribution is the knowledge that you're sharing with me, which is what it is, which is what I want to get out to the world. And if it were not for WGRN radio, neither of us would have a chance to be heard. So how are we winning or losing in this? Where's loss? Where is there a gain?
Well, first of all, let's be clear here. This information will get out beyond. This is only an interview with an information of facts. How we market WGRN is the role of the Occupy movement. The Occupy movement has to, if it's going to, it has to learn to use media, has to become media literate. It has to become literate in what do we need to know? What do you need to know as a human being? That's what it comes down to.
Well,
And
especially what do you need to know in this day and age to survive and thrive?
well, I'm suggesting this model that we put together called the Homeplanet Virtual University that uses the Homeplanet Trading Unit to share knowledge and wisdom and do it as an exchange of human energy.
Well, let's not go a step further without providing us a website where people can go for that. Where is that?
Well, the draft information is at homeplanet.org / HTU, Homeplanet Virtual University, HVU. And then there's also homeplanet.org / World Peace Posse, the WPP. The World Peace Posse is the individual philosophy, I guess, if you might call it, of what we consider to be the humanistic movement or the cultural creative movement, or I would say it even satisfies the Occupy movement, although it's too young that the Occupy movement hasn't even had a chance to really look at what's there. But the cultural creatives that are looking at it right now see very clearly that all the bases are touched in what we've been talking about for the last 30 years, not 10 years, 30 years. We've been talking about this stuff for 30 years. And now we're ready to make those steps that need to be taken. The Occupy movement is a tool.
Okay, a tool, a venue, a possibility. It's every bit of that. So in doing my best to keep it into the world called 15 Minutes of Fact, we're running up against a wall here. So what I need to have you do for this segment, which is, of course, on economics, ethics, energy, and health, is to bring it to a close and prepare us for what we're going to listen to in the next segment.
Okay, the next segment will go into the relationships between those areas that we touched on here, because I think that if anyone has listened to this, there's a number of areas that we may have opened up that are areas that they didn't know that they didn't know. For example, double entry bookkeeping. But the next discussion will be on how the medicine wheel interacts with the systems of the logo of the shift movement. What we're doing is looking at one of the developments of the shift movement and look at how the medicine wheel interacts with that. It's beyond the wheel. It's the next step after the wheel.
So that's going to be our next session.
That's yes.
Well, let me complete this one by asking how people can find you. For example, I located you on LinkedIn. So if someone were to go to LinkedIn and type in Mitchell, Mitchell, Gold, Gold, they'd likely come across your profile and connect with you there. How else can people find you?
I think if you go to LinkedIn and type ISO 26000. No, I'm sorry, I don't think you can there.
Or perhaps maybe
on
Google. How about Google?
If you Google me, make sure you get Mitchell L. Gold, not Mitchell D. Gold, and that's a long story.
Okay, now what about ISO 26000?
That would be a good thing to Google. You'll find that on the homeplanet.org website / World Peace Posse, WPP. The ISO 26000 is downloadable from there for free.
Well, that's a free that I kind of like. Doesn't seem to be a loss there. I want to thank you, Mitch, for this section. This completes the first of our four shows. For the listener, the next segment will deal with education, media, and relations at minimum. The third segment will go into government, spirituality, and infrastructure. And the final show will focus on art, environment, and a couple of other subjects to be provided by Mr. Mitchell L. Gold. So, tune in again. And this is Jerry Ashton of WGRNradio.com and our show, 15 Minutes of Fact.